on, wait. Prayer or okay? Okay, go.
Didn't know what it was. Okay.
We are in Texas.
Cool. All right. So thank you all for coming. This is the game reviewer panel. We have quite a few people up here, so we're going to kind of run through quick bios for everybody. At the far end, on my right, on your left, we have Hunter and Rebecca Thomason. They're contributors to Board Game Blender on the Dice Tower. It's two-player Showdown. They, according to them, occasionally make board game reviews for the Dice Tower, and have also contributed to the community through their own YouTube channel called Family Showdown. Next to them, we have Zee Garcia and Sam Healey. They're from the Dice Tower, of course, as many of you may know, one of the leading review sites on the interwebs. And Zee, I think, didn't you created the Blender, right? That was your idea, right? Cool. All right. Then to my direct right, we've got Edward and Amanda from Heavy Cardboard. I'm going to quote some of this stuff from their site because I thought this was really good. Quote, "No game is too heavy." Heavy games are their bread and butter. An avid cook and a big-time foodie, Edward works as an aviator by day and podcasts by night. Amanda loves worker placement games and economic games, and according to their website, is meticulous about logging her plays.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
And you use Board Game Set.
I do.
Good job.
Yes,
I like that
thank
too.
you.
Yep. By day, she's a medical biller and specializes in ophthalmology. Did I say that right? Yes. Good. I win the spelling bee today. Together with their partner Tony, they are focused on discussing heavy games through podcasts and videos, I guess.
Yep, starting YouTube channel.
Yep. At heavycardboard.com. If you didn't say that right. Myself, I'm Scott Morris. I used to run a review site called critshappen.com. It's now more of a discussion site around community stuff. And then I'm also president of Passport Games, which is a publisher. And then to my left and to your right is the infamous, world-famous Dan King. He is the Board Game Geek. I would like to read this because this is really good too. Board Game Geek's mission is helping you find the next board game you'll love by attacking reviews with high energy, which if you have not seen any of Dan's reviews, you need to go watch them. He is very energetic about his reviews. Over the last 4 seasons, he's reviewed approximately 700 games, which have been viewed by close to 4 million people. He's also a saxophone artist, saxophone artist,
Well.
and serenades games as an induction to his gaming library. Dan thrives on being an engaging member of the board game community and spreads his contagious energy to everyone he meets, one hug at a time. Yes, he is a hugger.
It's a side hug.
I can buy it.
Unless it's you.
That weird.
So, well, hold on, it's couples, right?
It's couples.
Yeah,
Dan and I are dating. We're talking. So,
what do you mean now?
So we all have a lot of personalities up here, so we're going to try and get through a lot of different things here. I have some questions that I have thought of in my brain and prepared and kind of shot out to some of the folks. Before we do that, does anybody want to open with a question from the audience? Yes, Mr. Gibson in the corner.
I actually have a question. When I watch a lot of board game reviews, and one of the things that I find really difficult is people who rate all games too high. It does no good for me. What are your thoughts on that?
You want to go? Go ahead.
I think it was funny. Actually, once you sent an email, I think, to me one time, it said, "Hey, is board gaming becoming more like video game reviewers?" Where it was like, it said, "Oh, this game is terrible, 9.3. This game is really, really good, 9.5." And like stuff like that. And it can't. I mean, your bias can shift over time. And 5 on board gaming is an average game. But these days, when I put a 5, it's like, whoa, that's bad. But no, it should be average. And I think it does happen over time. It's like that frog that's in the pot of boiling water. Like, you can turn the temperature up on it, and it will never know that it's getting too hot. It won't jump out. It'll just get boiled and die because it changes so slowly. And I think that happens with our ratings. We get excited about games. We rate them, and our bias slowly starts going in a certain direction. And we don't realize until we say, oh my gosh, 5 sounds terrible. It's really not. So I think it does happen over time. I don't know how you combat it other than trying to just recognize it's there and then be conscious of it when you're thinking of numbers.
I think that's the most interesting aspect of it is that for a lot of us, there's so much stuff we've got to get through, right? There's just piles of games we're trying to review or discuss or talk about, and we'll play them 2, maybe 3 times. And the first 2 or 3 times you play most games you like, it's awesome, it's great. But very, 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 very few games hold up 10 times, 11 times play in a row. So yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. Is that if you only rate and look at what you're rating at that point in time you're playing it, and not go back and check things later, that can lead to that syndrome. I can say personally, I've seen a lot more people not necessarily giving negative reviews, but giving pros and cons more. And I actually really like that, just as a fan. I know there's no one game for everybody, and I think that somebody coming out and saying, hey, this is what I really like, this is what I really didn't, and it's a good game, right? That's way better to me than let's just rail on this game is terrible, or let's just gush on this game is amazing, right? So.
Yeah, at Heavy Cardboard, we try to play games at least 4, 5, 6 times before we ever would feature it on a show. So yes, we may really, really like it the first couple plays, but if it evolves to where, the 4th and 5th, we're like, ugh.
That's like 30 hours for you guys.
And that's why when it comes to a lot of war games, people are, hey, how about this, how about this? Some of these war games take 8, 12 hours to play, and I mean, we have regular lives, so it makes it really hard, so it's few and far between on the war game side. But to go back to what you were saying as far as number of plays, it really does matter, because one game that sticks out in my head is a game by a couple of our favorite designers, Nuno and Paulo from What's Your Game, Panamax. We really dug it. When we reviewed it, played it 4 or 5 times, reviewed it, cool. We went back and reviewed it now, a year later, maybe not so much, because your taste evolved and everything else. And to go one other thing that you said about the highs and lows on games, in our reviews, we promise 3 things: fair, thorough, and honest. So we're going to highlight the stuff we like and the stuff we don't like. Another friend of ours, Alvin Viard, is a big-time reviewer from over in France, and we trashed one of his games aesthetically and graphic design wise, but overall we rate on a scale of 1 to 6, and we rated it a 5. Right. So it was really well thought of, but man, we hammered him on the graphic design, and he actually emailed us afterwards and said, I disagree with some of it, but yeah, all right, fair on some of it, yeah. And so, okay, then we did our job, because we get notified by people, they'll email us or whatever and say, hey, we listened to your review and everything, and thanks for turning me off from this game, because I would have wasted money on a game that wouldn't have suited me. Same day we get another email, man, that sounds awesome, thanks for turning me on to that game. And I'm like, getting both sides, we're doing our job then, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, that's exactly what it is. I mean, when people get to know you as a reviewer, then if you hate a game, then they'll know that either that game's for me, because I usually don't agree with you, or that game isn't for me because I usually agree with you. So one of the things that I usually try to do in my reviews is I always try to tell people, regardless of what I've said, try it. Because you never know, if I've hated it and you usually agree with me, you might still like it. So it's illogical to me to like everything.
Well, you were talking about rating creep is kind of what you got at, and I'm not sure, do you think it would creep up or down?
Generally, I think it creeps up, and I feel like a lot of times when I watch reviews, I've seen a lot of 7s, 8s, 9s, and 10s, and when I would rate a 7, 8, or 9, or 10 or something that I would play anytime somebody said, hey, you want to play this? But I look at what I hear people say, yeah, I might play that if somebody talked me into it, I'll give it a 7. Those two things don't.
Okay, I see what you're saying. It's, I guess it's interesting for me. Obviously, yeah, if you go back to a game that you haven't played in a year, you play it again, it might have dropped down for you. I would go and change that rating on something like BGG if I'm keeping a rating on there, which I tend to do. It's also, part of what informs that is the fact that pretty much everybody up here really likes board games. So most of the ones you rate are hopefully better than not, you know what I mean? Otherwise, you're probably in the wrong hobby, right? If I hated most games, this would be miserable.
That's why BGG is a sea of 7s.
Right. Yes, right. But there's also, but I also don't feel as bad playing something a few times, giving it a 7, and knowing that in a couple of years it might be a 5, because most people that are going to go buy that game are going to do what I just did. They're going to play it a few times and then not touch it again. And I'm okay with that, So I don't feel as bad. I don't feel like, oh, I'm misleading you because I gave it a 7 now, but it'll change later on for me. You'll move on anyway. You know what I mean?
And it might not change later on.
It might not, that's true, but if it did, I'm still okay with that because I'm doing it right now. And if I move on, you'll probably do that as well as a gamer. And knowing gamers, you'll probably
some of my favorite games are I like them more now than I did.
Sure.
Because it's just there's more depth there, and you sink your teeth into that stuff, and it's like, you know, it just gets better and better and better. So I don't know. I think the upward creep, might be, like he said, reminiscent of that fact that we just enjoy games.
And I do think games are getting better.
Now, what I usually try to do, and this isn't necessarily because me, Tom, and Zee talk about this all the time, because we have different. What does a 10 mean for you? Well, it means this. What is it? Well, it means something different for me. I usually try to stick to what BGG says, not because I think that's right, but that's what a lot of people look at. You know what I'm saying? So that's what I try to use when I'm rating on the Geek. I go through 7 is this and 7 is that, and I use that system. But if I'm just talking to you, I'm probably not going to give you a number, because that's arbitrary.
And on that note, the reviews are more important than the ratings, I think. Like on our podcast, if we feature a game, you're talking like 45 minutes. We're covering a game. To sum all that up into one number, you know, is it a 4 or 5, whatever, or in 7 or an 8, whatever. But the whole review should be enough to where you can make your own decision on, okay, these are the highs, these are the lows. My opinion in the end really shouldn't matter. It's this is what's good, this is what's not so hot about the game.
You can look at it a different way as well, is that there's so much information out there. People are avoiding bad games, right? I mean, you got 200 reviews to look at for a game, any one game, you go, that's not for me, I'm going to avoid that. And that may have been a 4 for me. I'm going to go find me a 9 or an 8 that's for me, instead of buying a bunch of bad games and finding the diamond in the rough, right?
Some self-selection, right?
Right, exactly.
The games you're buying, in theory, you're going to like.
Right, exactly.
Well, that's kind of where our reviews are. Of course, our reviews overall obviously are going to be higher ranked because we have a very kind of set budget on what we can buy and when we can play. So we're going to we research what we think we're going to really like before we even buy a game. I mean, that's how we got into this. Is we really watched a lot of Dice Tower and other reviews trying to figure out what games we like. So of course, when we're going to take the time to finally sit down and get to do a review, it's going to be a game that I like and I want to spend time talking about, or else I don't want to waste my time on it. So, but assigning a set number to it that's hard for me because it depends on the day. I'll arbitrarily pick a number. I'm like, yes, today it feels like an 8, but what I base that off, again, I should stick better to, like Sam said, and stick to exactly what BGG says, because for me, it changes so much.
What you know what I find weird is everyone up here kind of said that numbers are arbitrary. We don't live and die by them. We should hear the body of our work, and that really tells it.
But we all have numbers.
But, no. But I mean, just like 2 weeks ago, I got an email from a lady that said, "Hey, I really like your recap week show, your set list sort of, because basically all I do is I watch your highest numbers and I go back and watch the video." So people are really paying attention to that, whether we want them to or not.
True.
Which is interesting. They're looking at it going, numbers is almost everything, and we're saying, don't really pay attention.
The review is the real thing,
Don't pay attention to numbers. So there's like a mismatch in what people are.
The reality.
Technically, she's looking at the ones you like the best.
Right.
It's not really the number she's looking at. She's going, if you could arrange them, say this was the one I like the most, this is the one I like the least. That could be 10 to 8, or it could be this week it was a 5 to a 3.
Would that be a good question? Okay, if in 1 week I had a 3, 4, 5, and 6, does she go watch the 5 and 6? Does she not watch any of them?
Right, because they're so low.
That's,
so to speak.
I don't know. I
If
think
you give me
there's
an
a lot.
answer, it depends. Right? Depends on the person watching. So, Any other questions from the audience before I throw a curveball? Knuckleball. All right. So other than the obvious of not having enough time, more so for you guys probably than the rest of us, because your games take 4 to 8 hours.
Not that long. An hour and a half to 4 hours is a normal game.
After he just got done talking about a 12-hour war game. Right?
Well, no, that's some. Just as an example.
But other than the obvious of not having enough time, and we'll start with the Thomason, put that in on this one. What is the hardest part about creating new content for your channel?
the technical difficulties in our house would be the getting some of our equipment to work with like Windows 10, and then also trying to make sure the children and the pets do not get involved with our videos. Our cat has made several appearances in the background, if you're paying attention. I'm surprised he hasn't flown over the table already. And especially our little one, she's supposed to be in bed, and we'll start hearing singing from the back of the house. It's like, oh. Because our room's open. Our house is very open. You can run from the front door to the back door, and our game room's right there in the middle of that. So when you're trying to film, it gets exciting. If,
you mean you don't have a professional studio
with
we lights and rigging? And
No, so that's what gets exciting, I would say.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, it's balancing the family life. I mean, this is kind of time, but balancing family life with the filming. So we try to incorporate our family into the filming. That kind of balances that out. The girls get involved and they do things. They do things for the channel and for the blender and for the dice tower. So it kind of we get a little bit extra time because that's part of our family time.
You two are not allowed to say Tom is your biggest challenge.
No, I guess it's twofold. Working for the Dice Tower, it's creating not just more content, but new, different content. So it's not just, okay, more reviews or more this. That's where a lot of the things have come out of, Blender and Drunk Lunch Lunch and live gaming and having guests and whatever. But then on top of that, it's just playing the game enough, figuring out the rules, sitting down, just having doing the homework so I can get in front of the camera. And that surprisingly takes a lot of time.
Yeah, it does.
And especially if you get a game that has the 1-2 punch is a game that has a bad rule book, and then after you play it, you feel ambivalent towards it. Because that's the worst, because then you must continue playing that game. That's the way I think about it anyway. I can play a game 2 times and I adored it both times, I'm ready to do a review. Where I play a game 2 times, I despise the game, I'm ready to do a review. But a game I've played 3 times and I'm still not sure how I feel about it, I gotta keep playing it. And so that's the tough ones. Bad rule book meets game, that'll suck up a lot of time.
Well, the one thing that's really the most difficult for me is rule books. And so if I get one that's even a smidge not written well, oh, that's the worst. Because not only do I not want to read the rule book, I don't want to play the game now because the people didn't spend enough time making a good rule book. And so it puts me in a bad mood against that game. And I really don't like it when people don't take the time to hire an editor that does not know how to play the game and edit it. Now, after you read that, do you understand how to play the game? No. Back to the drawing board.
Yep.
Okay, because that's the hardest part for me is understanding how to play the game from just the written word. And what I usually have to do, especially if the rule book's written poorly, is pull everything out and set it up and play through it by myself, which I hate doing, and try to understand. I hate solitaire games. That's like the antithesis of board games. You play board games to have fun with other people. If I want to play a game by myself, I'll sit down with a video game. Dumb. But
don't hold it in. Let it out. It's unhealthy. Let it out.
We'll move on. But yeah, that's it for me. The hardest part is rule books.
Some of the rule books, and I agree totally with what Sam said as far as blind playtesting, like give it to somebody who doesn't know how to play, sit down, can you learn how to play? Especially when it comes to the heavier end of the hobby. Man, we're playing a game out there right now, Rochefort, which the game is unplayable from the rule book. So somebody actually took it upon themselves and rewrote the rule book. And I know it's a cop-out, but really it's time, but it's not just time to play the games. For our reviews, we'll prep anywhere between 6 and 12 hours each for our reviews, and just the amount of time to play the games as well as to do that, and we're on a every 2-week release schedule. It's It's a lot of stress, to be honest with you, just to be able to stay on schedule, and life gets in the way, and it's managing life around the show. And go for it.
I mean, I have a question that kind of piggybacks on this.
Yeah.
I've always been curious because a lot of times when we learn a game, we kind of look to y'all, like, is that rule correct? Are we doing it that right? But I've always been curious if you guys come across a rule in the rule book or your frustration, and you guys have no one else to look to because you guys got the game first. I was always, what do y'all do?
We go to the
You guys like
designer.
look at each other. You can't go to Board Game Geek and
Yeah,
be like,
if,
what
if
does this mean?
we have texted, emailed, direct message designers directly and
Yeah.
asked them questions.
A lot of times,
Yeah,
yeah.
if we don't know and we are the only ones, like
Yeah.
literally the only ones in America to have the game, we will go to the designer.
Okay.
Yeah.
You
Because
have
there's
to-
no other way
you
to go.
have to do that.
You
Right.
have to.
I mean, and then there's some people that are just, it's really obscure, or they're not on social media, or you can't get an email. Then it's follow your heart.
Yeah.
I mean, what makes sense? What's intuitive? Okay, this makes sense to play it this way. And then you sometimes end up with egg on your face because you have these people be like, no, you played that wrong. And I'm like, we had nothing to go on.
The internet corrects you?
Yeah, it's crazy. Who knew? You know what? And another thing that's difficult, and this is something that our show's only been around for about 2.5 years now, and is corrective criticism or the harshness of the internet, learning to deal with that. Seriously, because all of us up here have had people talk trash about them or just slam their review, whatever. And the one thing that I would suggest being on that side is, remember, we're people. You know, we just happen to have a microphone or a video camera or whatever, so it's learning to deal with some of the comments that it hurts sometimes.
Yeah,
I ain't gonna lie. Some of it's
I got a
tough.
die in a fire email once. I got an email that the subject said, "I hope you die in a fire."
Just
And yeah, it was pretty
People
amazing.
just
So.
don't. I mean, people will take the time to create fake Twitter accounts just to make fun of me. I'm like, really?
So yeah, learning to grow thick skin might be the hardest
That might
thing
be-
other than
Yeah,
time.
good
other than
point.
time,
You know,
that's
seriously?
really hard. Yes.
How about for you? I mean, I know for you it's getting you to work out in between.
For me, a lot of it is trying to balance. I think balance is the hard thing, especially most of us up here are doing this part-time. We have full-time jobs. We're trying to squeeze this in amongst a lot of other aspects of our life. And you're trying to continue to give the people that enjoy your content the exact content that they're there for, which is your bread and butter. But you're always trying to, as Zee and Sam mentioned, you're always trying to push the envelope, trying to find something new. It's hard to find that balance between how much time do I spend researching this new technology that's going to might allow me to do this, which might allow me to do this. How much time do you spend doing that versus working on the stuff that your people and your fans are waiting for? Right? And you know, like a lot of people when we go to Gen Con, a lot of people are like flipping out because why do they only have 100 games to sell? They knew this was going to be big, right? And the one thing that the publishers always say is, we can't predict demand. We can try to predict demand, but we don't know. And the crazy thing is when you're trying to think of something new to do or something edgy, you can predict what people might like, but you never know what is really going to get the views. Sometimes it will totally surprise you what doesn't get views or what does get views. So for me, the challenge is always, how do I split up my time between thinking or even brainstorming or even technically working on new stuff and working on the stuff that people are there to really watch and look next to. And that's the hardest thing.
For me, I ride a very different kind of vehicle than most of the people up here because I'm in the industry as president of a publishing company and used to do reviews. When I first came into the industry and actually got an actual official job in the industry, I stopped doing reviews because I felt that it was just the potential for biasness would be too strong of a perception and I didn't want to do that. So I started to create this thing called the critical question of the day, and I started to have discussions. And I tried to focus everything around the community and the people who follow Crits Happen and having discussions about things that were happening in the industry. But even that's proven to be a challenge for me at times because there are things that I want to talk about that I know about from my publishing experience and being on one side of the table. But if I bring it up in a light that could potentially be perceived as negative against any one of the other publishers, I don't want that to happen. So my challenge is finding the right subject that will be interesting enough for people to want to view that content and get engaged in that content, more so on the engaging part, because what I've gotten to now is 1 to 3 minute videos that are asking questions about specific topics and generating a community, having the real beef of the discussion, but not upsetting other publishers or other people, or getting that perception of, oh, he's being a jerk and he's going after somebody, or he's being too friendly to this person, pumping them up too much. And that's a big challenge as well. So, thoughts or follow-ons on any of that? Questions from anybody out there? Larry, you good? All right, so I just thought of one while people were talking about a couple of things that we didn't talk about beforehand, so we'll throw this out for everybody, and I'll let anybody jump in on this. You just made a very good comment. You said we're people, we have microphones or we have cameras, and nowadays, I mean, anybody in this room can become a board game reviewer. If you have the time, if you have the basic technology, and you can do it with your phone. That's what Rado does. Jen's gonna do this. Jen's gonna do that. Oh, Jen's not gonna do this. Anyone can do it, but we do it, and we do it regularly. And we do it consistently. And to your point, some of us keep schedules, and you want to stay on those schedules and keep consistency to your content. What's the thing that made you wake up and say, "I'm gonna do this"?
That's easy for us. I spend about 8 hours a day at my job listening to podcasts or music or whatever. I'm always I have my headphones on. And the games that we enjoy playing, nobody was out there talking about or reviewing or anything. And honestly, I got kind of pissed off. I'm like, how come nobody ever talks about the games I enjoy? Exactly.
Well timed.
Right. So my thinking has always been, if you're going to complain about a problem, have a solution. Solutions, heavy cardboard. So we said, okay, I'm going to start it. And I asked one of my buddies, hey, do you want to do this? Yeah. And life got in the way of him, and he can't do it anymore. And Amanda said she wanted to try it, and I didn't think she had a snowball's chance to be able to convey her thoughts clearly in the whole 9 yards, and because she's normally super shy.
See?
And so, but yeah, and it just basically filled a niche that we felt didn't fill, and that's how we got started. So, and that's the thing I would say to anybody who wants to do it: find your niche that isn't being covered, and something you have to be passionate about it. It doesn't matter the technology or the cameras or whatever, all that. It doesn't matter. If you're passionate about it, that'll come through. And that's the most important thing, I think.
I'm curious on your two answers to this, because I know what you both did before you did this full time. I would consider what both of you did to be a fulfilling thing. But.
Well, it can be. It can also be. I was a teacher, and so is Zee, and we can talk about that later. But being a teacher is very fulfilling. It's also very stressful, and it's very cumbersome, especially when you have 6 classes a day. And there's 15 to 20 kids in each one, and each one of them had to take a test that day. And so now you have that many papers or that many tests to grade. And
but my angel does not deserve to be.
I was just talking to my aunt about that before we came down here, about how dealing with the kids is one thing. That's actually fun sometimes.
The parents.
Dealing with parents, that's nightmarish sometimes. But the reason I started doing this was just because it was something that I was doing with my buddies. You know, it wasn't anything that it was just spending time with them, doing something that we enjoyed. It was really not, I'm not trying to cross you, but
No.
It wasn't a niche that needed to be filled. It wasn't that I was, I love board games, but I wasn't passionate about it. It was, first time I was asked a similar question was, it was at Origins a long time ago, well, not that long ago, but the question was, how do you get into podcasting? And when it came to me, I was like, know a buddy that has a podcast, and just sit down with them and do it, So that's kind of where it went. Then the opportunity arose that I could go full time, and I jumped on it because it's something that I enjoy doing. And when your job is when you work doing something that you love, it's never work, right? So that's why I went after it. So
It's a similar thing for me. It's I have been doing top 10s and spot bids and this and that with Tom for like 2 years at least before I started working for the Dice Tower. But when you are fortunate enough to be able to do that for a living, when the Dice Tower is fortunate enough to keep growing, and someone comes and says, "Hey, you want to do this?" You say yes, right? And teaching is very fulfilling, as Sam said. And drama teaching, because I am a theater teacher, is also really unstable and scary. And if the budget drops $2, they show up at your room and they get out of here. What are you still doing? So there's that also. There's that fear. So yeah, it was just something to do that was a lot less stressful than teaching a bunch of hours, then having rehearsal for the kids, and then when they go home, you stay at school and you build the set, and then you do it again next day. That's rough, and it's stressful, and you got people breathing down your back and all that. So yeah, when that opportunity presents itself, when it did, 2 years before I was even working with the Dice Tower, you do it because you like it. Do it because you're hanging out with buddies and you're talking about games. Who doesn't want to do that, We do that when the cameras are not on, right? Because it's cool. You like doing it. But then when it comes along and you can do it and get paid, then you do it.
We both get paid. We both have we both have very similar things because as far as extracurricular responsibility as a teacher, I was also a soccer coach. I was also a youth pastor. I wore a lot of hats in that school. So being able to just, there'd be times where I'd show up at 7 in the morning and I wouldn't get home until 11 o'clock at night because soccer team had a game, and you do that for, I taught for I think 14 years. And I was doing that. I was a teacher and a soccer coach. Most of those years, that wears on. And so the less stressful option was just the way to go.
Well, our story is a little bit different. If I ramble too much, Scott, tell me to stop.
You're done.
But,
Stop.
So I've been into board games all my life. I love board games. And I got out of board games probably about 10, 15 years ago. And I got back,
going that far back.
I got back heavy in the games.
It all started in third
about
grade.
10 years ago. And when I went out there, I didn't realize there was these. When I was younger, there wasn't a lot of games. Now there's thousands of games. So I had to go find a way to narrow that down to things I would like. So I hit things like the Dice Tower and things like that. And I became a super fan of the Dice Tower. And last year at this very convention, we met Sam and Zee. And they gave us the nerve to say, hey, we want to do something for the Dice Tower. And the Blender was like a perfect opportunity to do that because it was short, concise. You can do almost anything you want. It just has to be about a game. So we literally, like you said, we stuck our iPhone on a tripod and we started doing Blender. And hopefully we've come a long way from there in this year. So that's kind of our story of how we got into it.
Cool. Now you've grown a lot. I mean, in the last year alone, right? And you were part of the Dice Tower. Now you're on your own, and you've started the rule school. You started the weekly recaps. You kind of changed your formats there.
They started the weekly recaps. I was doing them with them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, right.
No, but the question was, when did you wake up and feel this passion?
Yeah, what was it that made you want to do it?
It sounds weird, but many people would say it was an accident. I say it was more fate. It was like I had taken some footage with a video camera doing a community service project through our church, Adopt a Family Thing for Christmas. We found out the family was living on a floor for 6 months, and we rallied a community around these people and did like an HDTV makeover of their house. And I captured this information on a camera, Windows Movie Maker, to make this video to show people how cool this was that a community rallied around these people. And everybody at the church came up to me and said, I want you to make a movie for me. Can you make a movie for me? And I said, I will, but I want to find out how to like really do this. So that night, I ordered Final Cut Pro on the Mac. I ordered the 2 500-page Mac manuals. And for the next 2 weeks, I spent every ounce that I was awake learning how to do that. And I finished those books, and I said, what should I do for a real project? I know I have some board games on my shelf. Literally, I shot 20 videos within 2 weeks. I upload them all at the same time, and the next day I get a call from Thomason once I have it. Like, some people say an accident. I say it was fake. I was being prepared all my life for this, and I didn't know. And that's how it happened. And now I'm super passionate about it. Yeah, I'm all about it, but it was an accident.
Nice.
That's something to say.
Mine was on a dare. I've known Rodney Smith, who most people know from Watch It Play, and we had been conversing over the interwebs, and I congratulated him on his show, like taking off and starting to gain momentum at the time. And it's funny because I used the word niche with him. I said, you're doing something that I don't see other people doing. You're doing like just unopinionated, just this is A to Z how you play the game, right? There's a little bit of kind of perception of the game is going to be, liked by you if it's on your show, but you're not saying go buy this game, don't go buy this game, I love this game, I hate this game. You're just saying this is A to Z. And I said, and this is, if you've ever seen Rodney's first videos, like in his basement, like there's no background, it's like boiling, like you could, it's a murder room, right? Like, it's really bad. And I made the comment to him, I said, yeah, I don't know if I could ever do anything like that. And he goes, I bet you could. And I was like, no, I don't have the equipment, I don't have the stuff. And he goes, shut up, stop making excuses, I've known you for a while, don't do that, go do it. And I was like, all right, I said, I'll figure it out. He goes, no, here, I'm not gonna talk to you anymore until you go do the video. Like, we're done, go. And that was it. So I was like, all right, well, Rodney's a good friend, so I don't want to have to happen, so go on, right? So made my first video and did it, and it's one of those things that I look back now and I look at it, it's only like 4 or 5 years old, and I look at that video and I kind of know how I think people like Rat and Dawkins feel when they look back at their videos in the 80s, and they're like, wow, did I really do that? And you're like, it's really bad. Like,
hair?
Yeah, no, I didn't have hair. I didn't have hair. So, but yeah, it was all on a dare. So. I thought somebody raised their hand, or was that just somebody kind of came in and out from over there? Okay, cool. All right. I'm going to throw the next one out to anyone here. Does any of you want to ask a question that all of us can answer?
I've got one.
You've got one?
I do.
Oh, you do? I'm sorry. Go ahead. No, they're paying to be here. No.
I have a question real quick. So when I grew up, I always looked for reviewers for insight and this sort of sense of trust. And one person who was really dear to me was Roger Ebert. So before I would go see a movie, I'd be like, what did he think? Do you guys think board game reviewing is ever going to get to that sort of critical level?
It is in some cases, actually. So there is papers that I know of that I've given games to from a publishing standpoint in New York, Florida, Utah, California, and Seattle and Washington that have asked for board games to do reviews on. The challenge that I have found in talking to people that do those is they're generally like 21, 22-year-old people who are temps at the place who just have their 1.5 by 3-inch column that they can fill, and they're looking for something extra to get in there. They're not looking at it in the sense of like what you're talking about, of front page of the entertainment section, and let's talk about the Avengers, or let's talk about whatever the hot movie is. I think that it has an opportunity to grow without a doubt, but I think that when you look at what board gaming is in terms of it's an entertainment spend, there are way many more things that are always going to be higher than that in the scope of it, right? I mean, I know this is going to sound weird, but from a publishing standpoint for me, when I release games, I actually look at what is the date I want to release the game and what movies are releasing around. Because if somebody has $60 to spend on a game, they also have $60 to go spend on the Avengers or on Suicide Squad or anything like that. And I don't want another entertainment that is going to be much more massively marketed to take away from somebody going in and getting my game. Now, I'm not stupid, and I know that the $5 billion Avengers makes an opening weekend is not what the game is going to sell on opening weekend. But even if it's a small percentage of it that I can keep from having that crossover, I do look at that. So it is out there in that sense, in a way, and I think it has an opportunity to grow. I think the biggest thing that can help that grow is people demanding it. The biggest one that I know of is Desiree News in Utah. They've done a lot of things with board games. They have a section in their editorial pages area that has, I want to say, like almost half of it now is board games. It started by reviewing games of, stuff you find in Hasbro's catalog in every Walmart, every Target, right? Pie Face, things that aren't games, but aren't games, whatever. Another story for another, longer story for a Target. But they've grown it to now doing games and they did food chain. So, which is pretty. That's up your alley.
Right, exactly. And I know that the Canadian version of NPR Radio just picked up a show that's all about board games. It's more, entry level, casual, family style games, whatever, but still, that's how people get into the hobby, get a bigger audience, more demand, it becomes that, I would think. And that's why, honestly, I count on these guys to do a great job to bring in more people to the hobby. I mean, it's a win-win all the way around, because even though these guys might not like the games we like, or a lot of their audience don't like the games that we like, some of them will. And these guys are going to bring them into the hobby, and then when those people go out, oh, what else is out there? That's where they find us. And so it's symbiotic in that respect. So hopefully just demand grows and that happens.
Waters rise, all boats float.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, that's good. I think the only part missing in that equation is money. I think for the people coming in is great, but the newspaper putting out a story that's, or a review or whatever it is, that's also good. It's the monetary demand that needs to be there for it to be that final piece of the puzzle that, as you said, makes the waters rise, because there's not a lot of, comparatively to the film industry, the board game industry is a drop in the bucket.
Right.
And so that's the final piece, I think, that would make this not just have a lot of penetration into people's lives, but also carry some weight, when you talk about it. I can launch into a conversation with just about anybody about, hey, did you watch the Avengers? I don't need to explain that. I'll say, hey, have you ever played Pandemic? And you'll explain it.
Board games are a thing? Really? Yeah, seriously, yeah, right? I mean,
so what I'm hearing is Carcassonne, the movie, right? That's what we need, right?
We live in kind of a bubble where board games is big to us, but it's really small to everybody else. Really, really, really small to everybody else. You, like Zee was saying, you can talk to anybody about the newest movie that's out there. But for most of the people you come in contact with, it's, you do what for a living? People actually make a living doing that.
Right.
And Scott has had the same thing.
Right.
Or other than Monopoly? Do you guys play just Monopoly all the time?
Is that like Monopoly?
I had a tear in my eye moment the other day. This is a great story. You'll love this real quick.
Oh, yeah.
So I told this story earlier. When people I don't know, I meet them, they go, what do you do? I tell them I make memories. Because the first thing is the question of, how do you do that, right? And I go into it through board games, like I give them the story about why. But most people, when I say board games, they immediately say, oh, like Monopoly, right? No lie. The other day, I'm out at breakfast, I run into a guy who was a vice president of Dell, where I used to work. Like vice president, top levels, dude makes like $500K a year, high rolling guy. And he goes, hey, you're like Gonzo, right? Like you left. And I was like, yeah, I've left Dell. I left like 4 years ago, man. I said, yeah. And he's like, yeah. And he goes, you're doing like video games? And I went, board games. Board games? Like Catan? And I was like, yes! I know. It was like total high five.
No, that's great. But just to continue, I mean, it is growing. We're seeing little glimpses of it here and there. The whole thing with the Packers. I hate the Packers, but the whole thing with the Packers playing Catan.
Yeah.
In their locker room. That we're seeing spots, little pinholes of light, where it's starting to break through. That's the cool thing, where you can see that it's growing, but we're not going to have leisure section first page of the New York Times.
Right.
It's just not going to happen anytime soon.
Yeah.
Anytime soon. I don't think. It's going to take a while to get there.
Well, 2015 is the first year that gaming hobby as a general reached over $1 billion. Right. Granted, $690 million of that was collectible card games, but everything, the board games grew 26%, dice and card games grew 76%. Like if it keeps going the way it's going, I don't think it'll ever go like with as big as the video games. But even if we can get to a quarter or a half of what that is, it'll be.
Right. I mean, you look at how video games were when we were kids. I mean, could you imagine that it would be the billion and billion dollar industry that it is
was
now?
fat back then.
Right, exactly. So
Nintendo.
now, again, it's never going to be anywhere close to that big, but just bigger penetration of it. Yeah, winning.
I was just going to kind of tag on to what Sam said and ask you guys what you think about, I mean, Barnes & Noble starting to sell a lot more hobby craft games, Target selling those kind of games and finding them in that industry. I mean, do you see that as a purely positive thing? Do you think there's a downside to it? I read a lot on the board game group. I think Larry's in here, and it seems like there's conversations about some people like it, but some people think it can spell doom for the hobby side of it because it gets too commercialized.
He was just talking about that the other day.
I think it's a positive thing, that's fine. But it's that balance where it seems to me, and I hate to give this spiel because it makes me seem like a doomsayer, but it seems like a lot of gamers want to spread the hobby, whatever that is. So they want more people playing, so they really have more people to play with, I think is what it is. They don't seem to understand or haven't sort of put two and two together to realize that more people playing on the other side of that coin means what you just said, where a big company comes in, they buy up everything you like, they make it all Avengers themed, and they put it back on the shelf at Target. Avengers Carcassonne. Right, yeah, so I mean, Star Wars Carcassonne is a thing.
It is, yeah.
Right?
It is. Star Wars.
That's what I'm talking
It's
about.
actually not that bad either.
Yeah, no, that's fine, right?
I'm just saying.
And that'll be okay.
It's on my
But
shelf.
how much is okay, right? When you are getting a promotional Carcassonne tile at McDonald's, is that okay? Is that still cool, right? Are you still good with that whole getting more people in the hobby, or is it now too commercial?
Right.
And I think that it's fine that Barnes & Noble is selling more, games, and I think it's fine because it's still those games that we like. At some point, that tips over to things we no longer care for or like, then I think you lose that again, right? It's like a step back at that moment.
Do you feel like Kickstarter maybe balances that out a little bit?
What's Kickstarter?
No, I don't think so. It's too small.
That tips the other direction.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of mediocre games that get published because of Kickstarter.
Oh, there's some really bad games.
And there are some really bad games that get published because of Kickstarter. Because it's really hard, I think at least, it's really hard to judge whether or not you're really going to like a game, or even whether or not the game's really good on a digital format. I mean, sure, we have that tabletop simulator and stuff like that, and that's good. That's a step in the right direction as far as being able to try something out before you actually have to put money to it. But there's still a difference between looking at something on a screen and having it on my table and being able to manipulate the pieces by myself and play a game that way. There's a complete difference there.
I will say it's sort of a side step to what I was saying. I think Kickstarter can put out a lot of bad games. I think a big publisher, I think Hasbro puts out a lot of bad games. Those just sell a lot. Okay, I'm not talking about that necessarily. I'm just talking about we as gamers, there's a part of all of us that likes the fact that these games of ours are esoteric to a certain degree. I'm talking about losing that. I'm talking about the game being basically vanilla, everybody likes this. And at that point, we that started in this thing are out. You see what I'm saying? It's like, oh, you like this? We're going to take that, we're going to give it to everybody. It's no longer yours. You probably no longer like it. That's sort of my little fear in the back of my head. That's more what I was talking about.
He mentioned, he said leave Asmodee alone. And I refuse to, actually.
I was kidding.
I know you were kidding.
I agree. That's my fear.
And when we found out that Asmodee bought up, what was that most recent?
F2Z.
F2Z.
That happened already?
F2Z.
Well,
It's still in negotiation.
It's not final.
So when we found out that could be a possibility, that for me that was a wait a minute moment. What's happening here? Because this juggernaut almost literally is
Yep.
all these small companies. I don't like that.
No, same here. And that's the first company that they've acquired, ate up, fill in the blank, that really affects our niche too. And so that's the first time that I was like, okay, slow down now. Now
Right.
what's next? Splatter? I mean, so
right.
you know.
Well, it was funny when they announced that. The thought dawned on me that at that point, if that went through, Tom's favorite games, Sam's, and myself would all be owned by the same company. They are 3 really different games. Okay, and the issue is not Asmodee buying up all of these companies.
It's
what happens when Hasbro buys Asmodee.
Exactly.
When Asmodee gets big enough, Hasbro's going to notice.
Right.
Hasbro.
Right. So what happens when they go? Here's $1 bajillion. You will now belong to us. So
The good news is Scott doesn't have anything to worry about. That's
it's good.
I will not sell out.
Keep it strong.
He was strong. What's that?
There's a burn.
Yes, sir. The thing that you mentioned a little bit, for me, for the Barnes & Noble thing, is the community. When I look at the bulk of the majority of publisher sales in the industry, they are through hobby retail stores. They're not through Targets. They're not even the people who have exclusive Target deals. The bulk comes from Hobby Channel. And a very large majority of the retailers that manage their hobby stores focus them around the community. And if I am Scott and King's Cards and we're in this area and we've built up this community and we've done all our work, and then in comes Barnes & Noble saying we're going to have game night, and 35 people have come to my store, 10 or 11 of them now go to Barnes & Noble's, that's a problem. Right? It starts to splinter the community. And it's not even just Barnes & Nobles. I get worried when I see retailers cropping up within like a mile of each other. Where I live in Austin, there's a board game cafe, and there's another board game cafe that wants to open within 0.8 of a mile of it. And I'm like, you're stupid. Like, you're literally stupid, because I understand competition and density and all that, but you're fracturing a community, and that's the whole point of what board gaming is about, is community. So that's my only concern. I do think it is a positive thing overall for Barnes & Noble to get involved. I think they need a lot more coordination. I think they need a lot more organization and a lot more prepping. But I do think that it is a good thing because it's going to bring more people in, and more people means more attention. I think we are several years away from what the doomsayers say.
No, I think so too. I agree with that.
Yeah, so-
And I think it's a positive thing too.
Yeah. She left. She had a question.
What's your question?
Did you know what her question was?
Rebecca had a question.
No, I don't.
Who had a question?
I have a random question for you
All right.
guys, because
God,
we're
what do you
still
know
kind of
now?
in the.
No, go
What?
Go ahead.
We're kind of feel like we're still in the discovery phase, because we noticed that over the last 5 years, our taste in games has changed significantly. So I was curious how you guys' taste in games have changed as you played all of these
I like strawberry.
volume games. Yeah. Like what you started out with and how different it is from now. I was just curious.
I think it's just when you start and you know 3 games, those 3 games are probably really good. They might end up, once you play 2,000, they're probably, not necessarily, but probably not as good to you. It's a frame of reference thing, right, obviously. I find for me, specifically to your question, it's more cyclical tastes. So I'll just go in and out of phases, like sometimes I'll get a new abstract game in the mail, and then I'm on an abstract kick for a while, Or I'll get a deduction game, and I'm like, man, I really want to start. I'll look up some new deduction games, and I get on the deduction game kick or whatever. And so, obviously, new incoming games will affect what you think of the rest of the games. You can't really help it, but yeah, I find my taste to be just more cyclical.
My tastes are probably more garnered towards the kinds of genres or the kinds of themes that I enjoy playing. Because I've always enjoyed sci-fi. I've always enjoyed fantasy. Those are the 2 kind of genres that I've always enjoyed playing. So I was here earlier with the designer panel, and they were talking about how mechanisms and mechanics are chief, and I understand that from a publisher's perspective. You want the good games and you want to add the shiny after. I got all that. But for me as a consumer, I'm looking at the shiny first. And I want the perfect balance of mechanism and theme. I want the two to be married, and those are the kinds of games that I enjoy the most. And I don't think that taste that I have has changed that much since the beginning.
For me, I'm the polar opposite of Sam, and that's what makes this hobby so great, right? There's stuff that caters to what Sam likes, and there's stuff that caters to what I like. Mechanics are trump all. It could be the epitome of a soulless Euro. If the mechanics are good and it's interesting mechanically, then I'm in. If it has a cool theme, all right, I'm on board. That's cool. If it doesn't, that's fine. It's not going to detract from the game. But to answer your question, I find that my tastes get more and more refined as I play more, because we're still fairly new to the hobby. We've only been in it about 3 years or so. And I noticed that I like more refined and more ingenuity. Like, if you have all the same old, okay, whatever, I have that already. But you take a game like Millennium Blades that is complete, there's nothing else out there like it. Yeah. Cool, all right, I'm on board with that. Or you take something like no, but no, it's all about refinement. But to cycle back real quick on the question earlier about the doomsday idea, my fear, I like rough edges on games because that gives games character, I feel like, and it makes them, it just gives it that something that just, oh wow, is this perfect? No, but that's cool. I dig this.
That's interesting. What do you mean by a rough edge, though? Is that
I don't want it super streamlined. Like, there are some things that some people will say, oh, this is bolted on. This just doesn't feel like it's completely integrated. And in some cases, yeah, that's not a good thing. But there are other times, and I'm trying to think of a game off the top of my head that does this, something like a small...
You mean mechanically, though?
Yeah, more mechanically than anything. I don't mind a rough edge here and there because it gives that game character. And my fear is, going back to the whole Asmodee, is everything becomes more homogenous. And that's my fear, is we get 16 versions of X, and I'm like, I don't want that.
Well, we have that now, right? That's the thing.
Well, there's still enough independent.
No, I mean from the big boys.
Yeah, agreed.
And
but
you're
there's
scared
still
they're
enough.
going to basically take, Food Chain Magnate and make it again, slight different change.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
We are not making Pizza Hut Magnate.
Right, exactly. But no, so refined taste and just something unique, something different for me.
Same for me, like, just as an example, the game that we're playing out there right now, we last played 2 years ago. Neither one of us really cared for it. Right now, we're loving it. We're lapping it up.
Yep.
And I think that's because just our tastes have changed, and I know that mine definitely have. Whenever we first started playing, theme was very important to me, and
I'm a bad influence. All right.
Theme was very important, and that was like the main thing I cared about. And now I'm like, that I don't care. I want the mechanics, and I want the difficult decisions, and I want the hardness, and I want trains, and I want stocks and shares, and.
Because you started out as a huge fan, Feld fan girl
Oh yeah,
too.
yeah,
right?
and that's kind of fallen to the wayside now, but.
Feld too light is what I'm hearing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, just the style, but yeah, somewhat.
Yeah, I
Like
mean,
Bora Bora, okay, yeah.
Like Castles of Burgundy went from like my favorite game ever to now Through the Ages is my favorite game, and it just that's just what I've found. It's just the longer that I'm in the hobby, the more my tastes change and develop and mature.
That evens out, though, right? That's like your GPA through high school. The first year in high school, you can really swing it. The fourth year, you really got to try hard to move it up a couple of steps, right? The longer you game,
Yeah.
right? Like my favorite game is Pandemic. It's going to be hard for that to drop from 1 to 11.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Because I've been doing it a little bit longer, so it's more like sort of established. You know?
Exactly.
Yep.
I have gaming Tourette's, I think.
So you just cuss at the table all the time?
I literally, my like game, like the game that got me into the hobby was Hero Quest. And I loved the idea of dungeon delving and this exploration. I hated role-playing, ironically, at the time. And I still really don't enjoy role-playing, but I respect it for what it is now. But I get on these like runs where I love dice games. It's all I want to play. It's all I want to see. It's all I want to create. It's all I want to work on. And then 6 months later, I'm like, I don't want to see another die for the rest of my life. I want to get into worker placement. And I get into worker placement, and I start doing these heavy, thick, meaty, like meat and potatoes type game. And then I'm like, God, I got to get away from this. I got to get something that's cards. So I tend to have these runs going back and forth and back and forth. I have never met a game I did not like in terms of this is a bad game. And that's what I tell people is that it is very hard to be a bad game. It is very easy to be a game that's not for me, right? So there's a lot of games that I look at and go, yeah, not mine, somebody else. Right? Yes, there is a blacklist of 5 that only my wife and I know of that I consider bad games. Interesting. But yeah, I kind of have Tourette's and go all over the place.
I actually haven't seen my tastes change that much, and I know this by I don't often get to go back and play games that I'm not reviewing. It's like the bad side effect of this.
Oh yeah, slave to the show.
Right. Exactly.
Right. First world problem.
Yeah. Don't often get to play the games that are on the shows that I really like, but when I do, more than 90% of the time I play it, I go, gosh, I forgot how amazing this game is.
Yes.
And that tells me that my tastes haven't changed that much. But one thing that does happen over time, and it sounds like bad, but I've become more picky and more harder to impress.
Get off my lawn.
Where it's like, the more games you play, the harder it is to impress you. So my tastes have changed, but it's been like, oh, okay, well, it's just kind of like this and this. Or it's just harder to impress. So like games, it's harder to, to be as excited about some of the games because I feel like, well, they've done that before.
Your uniqueness comment was something we were talking about. I can't remember if it was Sam, Zee, or who it was we were talking about before, but I made the comment of when I play a game, the first time I finish playing the game, the first thought that goes through my head is, what does this remind me of? Right? You know, somebody gave me a game, and mind you, as a publisher, I get games that are pitched to me all the time.
But not bad games.
No. Games that need work.
Okay. Okay.
Somebody pitched me a game a couple of weeks ago, and it was a hexagon-based drafting game that was set in like Roman cities that you had to build up your cities with science and politics.
They're going to watch this.
Right. Well, I'm like, this is 7 Wonders with hexes, right? Like it's like the first thing that went to my head was this is 7 Wonders with hexes. So that actually I think is a good question to ask is, what's a game that you've played recently that didn't give you that feeling? That didn't give you the feeling of this reminds me of something else. This is unique. This is separate from everything else in the universe.
Millennium Blades.
Sam, you alright? You awake?
I'm gonna say London Dread.
Okay.
Yeah, that's pretty different.
Food chain magnate, because their Splatter doesn't put out anything that's like anything out there. None of their games are like one another either.
They're unique in every way.
They really are. And real quick, you said for you there's no such thing as a bad game. I think the worst thing you can call a game, like the death knell of a game, is boring. If a game's broken or whatever, maybe that could be fixed. But if it's boring,
but boring is subjective.
Fair point. But yeah, it's just
what bores you might excite me.
Fair point. So. Fair. Ever the optimist.
Yeah, we recently played Mystic Veil, and while maybe the individual mechanisms are not exactly the most innovative, but the combination and that card crafting, I really loved. We were just talking earlier about Dominion and how much you love playing that game. Well, Mystic Veil's got that, but then you're also building the cards while you're building this up, and that just kind of blew me away. I like the potential with that and the things that you can do with it, and that just kind of raise that interest level that much more. It's something new that just it's cool to try that.
If you own Mystic Veil, don't leave it in the car like Edward.
Oh my gosh!
If y'all haven't seen that picture in a hot car,
they will melt.
The plastic cards just melt and bad stuff.
It's like Shrinky Dinks.
It was like a kids game called, a family game called Smugglers. from.
Doesn't sound like a family game.
Depends on your height. Come on, Scott.
It's candy. It's candy.
All right. Yeah. So in that game, you really got clay that you're putting little gems in, and you're rolling them down a hill, trying to fit it through a slot, and then they're trying to guess what you're doing. Cosmos. Yeah. Cosmos. That's like nothing.
That's basically Klaus 2 we're going, he'll buy anything. Look. It's got my name on it, they will buy. Let me show you.
We're almost at time, I guess. Any last questions? Anybody in the audience?
Kind of piggybacking on your Hero Quest comment, my game that got me into the hobby was Carcassonne. I was curious what game really just took off your hobby of board games.
Yeah, mine was Hero Quest.
I was curious, do y'all have one that y'all
You mean
remember?
the one that originated us, or the one that really got us
Like the hobby board game that got us into it, you're saying?
Well, just any game that just really took off your interest in the hobby.
I'm gonna spoil my podcast for Dice Tower, but for me it was the game Dungeon, way back in the day.
Oh yeah.
My mom bought me the D&D basic set, and I went to go get for a module for it. And there was a board game by TSR. I'm like, what is this? And so I took it off and played it. Like, this isn't Monopoly. This isn't Sorry. This is something a little more, right? And that was just a blast to play. And went from there, right?
For me, I've never played Catan. Don't shoot. I just have never played it. Very so I've heard. But honestly, we stumbled upon a game group that's in our neighborhood. This is way before we were gamers, right? We went from hobby games to we messed around with Carcassonne and Arkham Horror like once or twice and forgot about the hobby for a couple of years. And then when we moved, we found this group. And they brought me along, and I played Dominant Species. Hey, come on, get your feet wet, right? And I was like, just mind blown, and that's all she wrote for me. So.
I really don't know. Like,
Dominion or
Dominion, maybe Dominant Species, Agricola, any of those, I think. I really don't. Honestly, I really don't know. I'm not good at the remembering sometimes.
we have outlines for the podcast, right? So
You can do that. A lot of you are editing, right?
Yeah.
So.
I'm a good editor.
I think the one for me that really kind of opened my eyes to the greater world that is hobby gaming is Warhammer 40K. Because I really enjoyed the hobby aspect of it, and from there, probably my interest into board games and really being turned on to that specific part of our hobby was probably the Lord of the Rings the Lord of the Rings cooperative game, Fantasy Flight. That's probably the one that was my board gaming specific, but for hobby gaming it was probably 40K.
yeah, Magic for me, I guess, back before that.
Anyone who likes painting, follow Sam. He's an amazing painter of models.
Yeah, it was Carcassonne, I think. That or San Juan or Ticket to Ride. I don't remember which one first, but those four. Those three, rather. Cool.
It was kind of tough for me to pick one because my family, we had, Trivial Pursuit, and we had Monopoly and some other roll and move kiddie games and stuff. But then, like in high school, we found the Balderdash and Apples to Apples, some of the party games. Wow, there's more to it than the roll and move. That's pretty neat, And then when we met and we started playing a lot more, it just kind of exploded after that, just to see just the huge variety that's come out there now. So
I can answer for her. It was the game of Dominion.
Yeah,
we had like a double date kind of thing,
Yeah.
And then one of my friends worked at a comic book / game store, and he brought that out, and she just fell in love.
Yeah, that was fun.
Cool.
With the king.
With the game. We were already loving
Yeah.
All right. So I think we're gonna wrap up. Anybody up here have any last final thoughts or?
A lot of the questions, we always tend to get the same question a lot towards the end of the thing. So I've written down some thoughts that I have because usually people always ask, like, the most asked question I always get is like, what advice could you give me if I was thinking of creating some content, whatever? And I thought about this a lot. And what I would tell people is like 3 major things. Number 1 is have fun first. A lot of times people try to overthink things. They try to put the cart before the horse. They try to start asking me what equipment should I buy. And And they start thinking of all this other stuff as opposed to just, I just say, go out, do something that you're passionate about within the hobby. It doesn't matter what it is, whether it's reviews or instructional videos, podcasts, it's skits. Like, you know, there's so many different things you can do in the board game realm. Find something that you're passionate about, find something that maybe you have a skill with, and have fun with it first. And try it and do it. And then if you've got some traction, and after a bunch of whatever you're doing, it seems like it's going somewhere, at that point sit down and do 3 things. So you're gonna have a captivating vision of where you'd like to see yourself, and what you want to be. And then make that up with a comprehensive strategy. And then follow that up with relentless implementation. Those 3 things are imperative once you've figured out what do you want to do. But don't be afraid of trying a bunch of different things at first. Fail fast is what I say. Fail fast. It's okay, fail often, fail fast, because the faster you get to failure, the quicker you'll be to success. Because the worst thing you can do is stay with a bad idea too long. The other thing is focused energy over time is momentum. You keep that. You keep your focus, and you got this laser type focus, and over time that will give you momentum. The other thing is it's not as easy as it looks, and anything worthwhile in life, period, is uphill. Everything. It's not the path of least resistance. If you're doing something hard or doing something harder, most likely you're on the right path. The problem is we have uphill hopes, but we as humans all have downhill habits. And so what happens is, one of the habits that I have, and I think as humans we all inherently have, we're programmed this way, we tend to think of ourselves first. And just by doing this whole video stuff, I've realized that that's like backwards, but we're programmed that way. I mean, the first word we ever say when we're a kid, with any emphasis of power, is mine. Mine. And we learn that when we're young, and it's like, it's part of this thing where it's like, we always think of what can we get? It's like self.
Sure.
It's all self-pointing. And I found that the board game community is almost like an outlier. It's such an amazing community that people are so loving, so helpful, and so excited about helping others, give people information. And it's not like that everywhere. So we're in like a really awesome place. And I would say if you're going to do anything, be a huge part of the community, an active member of the community, be part of the giving. And the final thing is, instead of going into it thinking of what can I get out of this, what can I get out of doing this podcast? Where can I get? What could the industry or people give me? Flip it on its head and say, what can I give to the people? How can I add value to the people? Because if you give and you focus on the giving, and you do that with that focus intensity over time, the getting will take care of itself. So it's have fun first, then strategize, and focus on giving. Those would be mine.
That's solid.
Yeah.
That's a good ending right there.
I work out the math, and it comes up, it's good math.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for being on the panel.